Hey there, friends. Welcome back to my little corner of the internet. If you're new here, I'm Martha Hartley, or just Martha because titles like Mrs. feel so stiff. Before we dive in, let me give you a quick spoiler. This story is about how my own kids tried to put me in a nursing home, and instead of fighting them head-on, I made a choice that shocked everyone, including myself. It's messy, raw, and at times pretty damn funny. So, if you want to hear how I turned my life upside down and gave away my house to someone who wasn't even family, hit that subscribe button and stay with me till the end. Trust me, it's worth it. Now, let's start from the beginning, shall we? My name is Martha Hartley, and for the past 40 years, I've lived in a charming but slightly creaky Victorian-style home in Maplewood, New Jersey. You know those houses with wraparound porches and flower boxes under every window? Yeah, that's mine. Well, it was mine. But more on that later. My days are simple now. I wake up early, drink 2 cups of coffee while watching the sunrise, and then spend hours tending to my garden. Tomatoes, zucchini, lavender, it's all out there. Sometimes I bake pies. Apple pie, pecan pie, cherry pie, you name it. Baking keeps my hands busy and my mind sharp. And when the sun sets, I sit by the fireplace with a good book or chat with Mr. Thompson, my neighbor across the street. He's a retired mechanic who loves telling stories about his wild youth. Honestly, he's one of the few people left who still talks to me regularly. But don't get me wrong, I'm not lonely. Not really. At least, I didn't think I was until recently. See, I have 3 kids, Emily, Daniel, and Sophie. They're grown-ups now, living their own lives far away from this sleepy little town. Emily's a high-powered lawyer in Manhattan, always dressed in tailored suits and clicking around in heels. Daniel's a real estate agent in Chicago, though he hasn't sold a house in months. And Sophie? She's a mom herself, raising 2 rambunctious boys in Boston. They visit occasionally, but only when they need something, or think I do. Looking back, I realize I should have seen it coming. The way they'd exchange glances during our Sunday dinners. The way they'd nod along whenever someone mentioned assisted living facilities. But I never imagined they'd try to take my home away from me. My sanctuary. My everything. So, picture this. It's a crisp autumn afternoon, and my kids are over for dinner. The table's set with my best china, and the smell of roasted chicken fills the air. Sounds cozy, right? Wrong. From the moment they walked in, I could tell something was off. Emily kept checking her phone. Daniel looked like he hadn't slept in days. And Sophie, well, Sophie just seemed sad. We made small talk for a while. How's work? How are the grandkids? Blah, blah, blah. But then Emily cleared her throat and said, Mom, we need to talk. Oh boy. Those 5 words sent chills down my spine. Turns out, they'd been talking behind my back. About me. Specifically, about whether or not I'm still capable of taking care of myself. It's not safe for you to live alone anymore, Emily said, her voice clipped and professional, like she was presenting a case in court. You're forgetting things, Mom. What if something happens? I wanted to scream, to throw my mashed potatoes at her face, and tell her exactly how many sacrifices I made for her over the years. Did she forget the nights I stayed up sewing costumes for her school plays? Or the weekends I worked double shifts so she could go to summer camp? But I didn't. Instead, I smiled and said, Don't worry, sweetheart. I'm fine. Daniel chimed in next, saying something about how selling the house would be practical. Practical? For who? Them. And Sophie. Poor Sophie just sat there, twisting her napkin into knots. By the time dessert rolled around, I was exhausted. But deep down, I knew this conversation wasn't over. Not by a long shot. After that dinner, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying their words over and over in my head. Was I really slipping? Had I become a burden without realizing it? Part of me wanted to call them and apologize, to say, You're right. Maybe I do need help. But another part of me, the stubborn, fiery part, refused to give in. The next morning, I went outside and started pulling weeds in the garden. It's funny how physical labor can clear your mind. As I yanked out dandelions and trimmed rose bushes, I thought about everything I'd done for my kids. I raised them single-handedly after my husband passed away. I worked full-time, volunteered at church, coached their soccer teams. Hell, I even taught them how to drive. And now they treat me like some fragile old lady who can't tie her own shoelaces. It hurt, deeply. But instead of wallowing, I decided to fight back quietly. Because sometimes, silence speaks louder than words. That's when Mr. Thompson stopped by. He brought over a plate of cookies and asked how I was doing. I told him about the dinner, and he listened without interrupting. When I finished, he patted my shoulder and said, "Martha, you've spent your whole life giving to others. Don't let anyone take that away from you." His words stuck with me. That day, I realized I needed to make a choice that would change everything. So, here's the thing. After that disastrous dinner, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd drop the whole assisted living nonsense. You know, chalk it up to a bad night and move on. But nope. A week later, Emily called. Her voice was all sugar-coated sweetness, like she was buttering me up for something big. She said, "Mom, we're coming over this weekend. We need to have a family meeting." A family meeting. Doesn't that sound so corporate? Like we were about to discuss quarterly earnings instead of my future. Anyway, I agreed because, well, what choice did I have? Telling them no would have just fueled their fire. When they arrived, they acted weirdly formal. They even sat in a semicircle in my living room, like some kind of tribunal. Emily had her laptop open, ready to present her case. Daniel fidgeted with his tie, looking uncomfortable but determined. And Sophie, poor Sophie looked like she wanted to disappear. Emily started with the usual spiel. "Mom, we love you, but we're worried about your safety." Then she launched into this whole presentation. Yes, an actual PowerPoint, about the risks of living alone at my age. Slides included statistics on falls, memory loss, and emergency response times. It was like being back in school, except this time, the subject was me. I tried to interrupt, to tell them how ridiculous this all was, but they kept talking over me. Finally, Daniel chimed in, saying, "Look, Mom, it's not just about safety. It's also practical. The house is too big for you. Selling it could give you financial security." Practical. Financial security. Those words burned in my ears. Because what they really meant was, we don't want to deal with you anymore. By the time they finished, I was seething. But instead of yelling, which, trust me, I wanted to, I took a deep breath and said, "Thank you for your concern. But I'm not going anywhere." And then I walked out of the room. Left them sitting there, staring at each other like deer caught in headlights. Part of me felt guilty, but most of me felt powerful. For the first time in years, I stood my ground. Little did I know, though, this was only the beginning. After the intervention, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. My own children saw me as a problem to solve, not a person to love. I spent hours pacing around the house, replaying their words in my head. Was I really losing my grip on life? Or were they just too busy to see me for who I am? Then one evening, I found myself in the attic, rummaging through old boxes. That's when I stumbled upon a letter from my late husband, George. He wrote it shortly before he passed, and I hadn't read it in years. In it, he reminded me to always stay true to myself, to live boldly and unapologetically, no matter what others thought. Those words hit me like a lightning bolt. Suddenly, I knew exactly what I had to do. I wasn't going to let my kids dictate my life. If they didn't value me, or my home, then I'd find someone who did. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Mr. Adler. He's been handling my estate planning for years, and while he's a bit gruff, he's fiercely loyal. When I told him my plan, to transfer ownership of the house to someone else, he nearly choked on his coffee. "Martha," he said, "are you sure about this? Once you sign those papers, there's no going back." But I was sure. More sure than I'd been about anything in a long time. The question was, who should I give it to? That's when Clara came to mind. Clara Bennett, the young artist renting the studio above my garage. She's sweet, hardworking, and full of dreams bigger than this little town. Plus, she's always treated me with kindness, not pity, like my own kids. I didn't tell anyone, not even Clara, what I was planning. It felt like a secret mission, and honestly, it gave me a thrill I hadn't felt in ages. For once, I was in control of my own destiny. Clara's been renting the studio above my garage for about a year now. She moved here from Brooklyn, chasing inspiration for her art. At first, I barely noticed her, just another tenant paying rent on time. But over time, we started chatting more. She'd bring me cups of tea while I gardened, and I'd share stories about the neighborhood. One afternoon, after the infamous intervention, Clara stopped by with a fresh batch of cookies. She must have seen the stress lines etched on my face because she asked, "Everything okay, Martha?" I almost told her everything right then and there. About my kids, the house, the intervention. But instead, I smiled and said, "Just family drama. Nothing new." She nodded knowingly, like she understood more than she let on. Then she opened up about her own struggles, how hard it is to make ends meet as an artist, how she dreams of owning a home someday but knows it's probably impossible. Her words stuck with me. Here was this talented, kind-hearted woman who deserved so much more than life had given her. And suddenly, my idea didn't feel crazy anymore, it felt right. Later that night, I drafted a legal agreement with Mr. Adler. It outlined the terms. Clara would become the official owner of the house, but I'd retain lifetime residency rights. She'd also agree to maintain the property and honor its history. It was a bold move, but I knew Clara would respect it. After finalizing the legal agreement with Mr. Adler, I knew I had to approach Clara carefully. I didn't want her to feel pressured or obligated. It had to be her choice. But how do you casually say, "Hey, I'm giving you my house," without sounding completely bonkers? I decided to start small. One morning, I invited her over for coffee. We sat at my kitchen table, sunlight streaming through the windows, and I asked her about her dreams again. Not in a probing way, but gently, like I was genuinely curious. She hesitated at first, then admitted, "You know, Martha, I've always dreamed of having a place like this. A real home, not some cramped apartment where I can barely hear myself think. Somewhere I can create art, grow plants, maybe even host friends for dinner." Her eyes lit up as she spoke, and I could see the longing in them. That's when I took a deep breath and said, "What if I told you that dream might not be as far away as you think?" Clara stared at me, confused. "What do you mean?" I explained everything. The fallout with my kids, my decision to transfer ownership of the house, and why I wanted her to have it. She looked like I just dropped a bombshell, and honestly I kind of had. "Martha," she stammered, I don't know what to say. "Are you sure about this? What about your family?" I smiled, feeling a wave of calm wash over me. "My family made their choice, Clara, and now I'm making mine. You deserve this house more than anyone else I know." She teared up, which made me tear up too. We hugged, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. Of course, I warned her there would be challenges ahead. My kids weren't going to take this lying down, but she nodded bravely. Little did I know, those challenges were closer than I thought. A week after finalizing the agreement with Clara, I called my kids and invited them over for another family meeting. They showed up looking smug, probably thinking they'd convinced me to see things their way. How wrong they were. We gathered in the living room, the same semicircle set up from the intervention, and I cut straight to the chase. "There's something I need to tell you," I began, my voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside me. "I've decided to transfer ownership of this house." For a split second, they looked relieved. Emily even smiled, probably assuming I'd sold it or moved into assisted living. Then I dropped the bombshell. "The new owner is Clara Bennett." Silence. Absolute, deafening silence. For a moment, I thought they might actually pass out. Then Emily exploded. "Clara? The renter? Mom, are you serious? Do you have any idea what you're doing?" Daniel chimed in next, his face red with anger. "This is insane. You're just handing over your property to some stranger? What about us? Your own children?" Sophie stayed quiet, her expression torn between shock and disbelief. I held up a hand, cutting them off before they could spiral further. "Clara isn't a stranger. She's part of this community, and she values this house in a way none of you ever did. Besides, I'll still live here. Nothing changes for me." But they weren't hearing it. Emily accused me of being manipulated by Clara, while Daniel stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Sophie tried to mediate, but her loyalty was clearly divided. By the end of the night, I was exhausted, but also strangely liberated. For years, I'd tiptoed around my kids, trying not to upset them. But now I didn't care anymore. I'd made my choice, and I was sticking to it. Within days, the entire neighborhood seemed to know about my little arrangement with Clara. Some people were supportive, praising me for thinking outside the box and helping a younger generation get a foothold in an increasingly unaffordable housing market. Others, well, let's just say they weren't so kind. Mrs. Henderson from across the street cornered me one afternoon while I was watering my roses. "Martha," she whispered conspiratorially, "are you sure about this? Giving away your house like that? What happens if something goes wrong?" I gave her my best polite but firm smile. "Doris, I appreciate your concern, but I've thought this through. Clara's a good person, and she'll take care of the house." She pursed her lips but didn't press further. Still, I could tell she wasn't convinced. Then there was Mr. Thompson, bless his heart. He stopped by later that evening with a six-pack of beer and a knowing grin. "Heard you stirred up quite the hornet's nest," he said, popping open a bottle. I laughed, though it came out a little shaky. "You could say that. Feels like half the town thinks I've lost my mind." "Nah," he replied, clinking his bottle against mine. "They're just jealous you had the guts to do something bold. Most folks around here play it safe their whole lives. You're showing them there's another way." His words stuck with me, because as much as the rumors stung, I knew I'd done the right thing, for me, for Clara, and for the future of this house. Of course, the backlash wasn't limited to whispers and side-eye glances. Clara herself started feeling the heat. One day, she came to me visibly shaken. "Martha," she said, "people are saying awful things about me. That I tricked you into this, that I'm taking advantage of you. I don't want to cause trouble for you." I pulled her into a hug, feeling a surge of protectiveness. "Clara, listen to me. You haven't done anything wrong. This was my decision and I stand by it. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." It didn't take long for Emily to escalate things. Within a week of my announcement, she showed up at my door with a man in an expensive suit, her high-powered attorney, Mr. Grayson. He looked like he belonged in a courtroom drama, complete with slick-back hair and a briefcase that probably cost more than my car. "Mom," Emily said, her tone clipped, "we need to discuss this situation further." I crossed my arms. "What situation are we discussing now, Emily?" Mr. Grayson stepped forward, all smooth professionalism. "Mrs. Hartley, your children are concerned about your mental capacity at the time of signing the transfer agreement. They believe it may not reflect your true intentions." My jaw nearly hit the floor. Mental capacity, true intentions. Oh, they were pulling out the big guns. I turned to Clara, who was standing nervously by the staircase. "Clara, could you excuse us for a moment?" She nodded and slipped upstairs, though I could tell she was shaken. Once she was gone, I faced them head-on. "Let me make one thing crystal clear. I am fully aware of what I'm doing. This decision was mine and mine alone. If you want to challenge it legally, be my guest. But don't think for a second I'll back down." Emily flinched at my words, but Mr. Grayson just smiled, a cold, calculating smile that made my skin crawl. "Very well, Mrs. Hartley. We'll see you in court." The next few weeks were a blur of depositions, document requests, and endless phone calls with my lawyer, Mr. Adler. He warned me repeatedly that this wouldn't be easy. "They're going to try to paint you as unstable, Martha," he said during one particularly tense meeting. "We need to prepare for everything." And prepare we did. I spent hours reviewing old photos, journals, and letters to prove I was still sharp as a tack. Clara helped too, gathering evidence of how much she contributed to maintaining the property. Meanwhile, Sophie stopped by occasionally, looking torn between loyalty to me and her siblings. But the hardest part wasn't the paperwork or the prep, it was the isolation. Friends who once waved hello now avoided eye contact. Neighbors whispered behind their hands. Even Mr. Thompson admitted he'd caught wind of some nasty rumors. Still, I refused to let it break me. Every time doubt crept in, I reminded myself why I'd done this in the first place. For independence. For dignity. And yes, for Clara, for someone who truly appreciated what I had to offer. As the legal battle dragged on, tensions within my family reached a boiling point. Daniel stopped calling altogether, while Emily bombarded me with texts demanding I reconsider. Sophie, bless her heart, tried to mediate, but even she couldn't hold us together anymore. One evening, after another exhausting day of prepping for court, Sophie showed up unannounced. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying, and she looked utterly defeated. "Mom," she said softly, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. "Can we talk?" I nodded, bracing myself for whatever came next. She took a deep breath. I understand why you did this. I really do. But Emily and Daniel, they feel betrayed. They think you're choosing Clara over them. And what do you think, Sophie? I asked gently. She hesitated, then sighed. I think they're wrong. You've given us so much over the years, Mom. Sacrificed everything for us. And now, when you finally do something for yourself, they act like it's the end of the world. Her words brought tears to my eyes. Finally, someone understood. But before I could respond, she added, "That doesn't mean it's easy, though. Emily keeps saying you favor Daniel, and Daniel resents Emily for being successful. It's like none of us know how to stop fighting." It broke my heart to hear that. All those years of trying to keep the peace, of smoothing over arguments and playing mediator, and yet here we were, tearing each other apart again. "Sophie," I said firmly, "this isn't about favoritism or jealousy. This is about me taking control of my life. Your brother and sister can hate me for it if they want, but I won't apologize for doing what's best for me." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know, Mom. And I'm sorry. For everything." We hugged for a long time, both of us crying silently. In that moment, I realized something important. No matter how messy things got, Sophie would always be my ally. Unfortunately, the same couldn't be said for Emily and Daniel. The cracks in our family weren't just surface level, they ran deep. And as the trial approached, I knew some of those fractures might never heal. The day of the trial arrived way too quickly. I woke up early, my stomach in knots, and stared at myself in the mirror as I got dressed. "You've got this," I whispered to my reflection. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. Clara drove me to the courthouse, her hands gripping the steering wheel like she was trying to hold herself together. "Martha," she said quietly as we pulled into the parking lot, "if this goes south, I'll walk away. I don't want to be the reason your family falls apart." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "Clara, listen to me. This isn't on you. It's on them, for not trusting me to make my own decisions. No matter what happens today, I stand by my choice." Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was electric. Emily sat stiffly beside Mr. Grayson, flipping through papers like she was preparing for battle. Daniel slouched in his seat, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Sophie, bless her heart, sat near me, offering quiet support. When the judge entered, everyone stood. The formalities began, and soon enough, it was time for testimonies. Mr. Grayson called Emily to the stand first. She spoke confidently, presenting herself as the concerned daughter who only wanted what was best for her aging mother. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steady but tinged with emotion, "my siblings and I love our mother dearly. But recent events have raised serious concerns about her ability to manage her affairs independently. We fear she may have been unduly influenced by Miss Bennet." My blood boiled. Unduly influenced? Seriously? Next, Daniel testified, though he seemed reluctant. His answers were short and vague, clearly uncomfortable under cross-examination. When Mr. Adler asked him directly if he believed I was mentally competent, he hesitated before muttering, "I guess so, but it's complicated." Finally, it was Clara's turn. She walked to the stand with quiet determination, her hands trembling slightly as she swore to tell the truth. Mr. Grayson immediately launched into an aggressive line of questioning, trying to paint her as manipulative and opportunistic. "Ms. Bennet," he sneered, "is it true that you approached Mrs. Hartley about transferring ownership of the house?" Clara shook her head firmly. "No, sir. That's not true. Mrs. Hartley came to me with the idea. She explained her reasons, and I accepted because I trusted her judgment and because I genuinely care about this home." Her words rang true, even to the skeptical faces in the room. Mr. Adler followed up with gentle questions, allowing Clara to share how much the house meant to her and how committed she was to preserving its legacy. By the time she stepped down, there were actual tears in her eyes, and mine. Then it was my turn. As I settled into the witness chair, I felt every eye in the room on me. My palms were sweaty, my heart pounding like a drum. But then something strange happened. Instead of focusing on the present, my mind drifted to the past. I remembered the night George died, The man I loved, the father of my children. He was only 42, taken too soon by a heart attack. I was 36, suddenly alone with 3 young kids, and no idea how to keep us afloat. But I did. I worked 2 jobs, waking up before dawn to teach elementary school and staying late to tutor struggling students. Nights were spent sewing costumes for school plays or baking cookies for bake sales. Every penny went toward keeping a roof over our heads and food on the table. One memory stood out vividly: Emily's 8th birthday. I couldn't afford a fancy party, so I made one happen anyway. Balloons from the dollar store, a homemade cake, and a scavenger hunt around the backyard. She'd laughed so hard that day, her cheeks flushed pink from running in circles. Another flashback hit me harder: Daniel's high school graduation. He'd struggled academically, constantly doubting himself. But I never gave up on him. I stayed up late helping him study, celebrating every small victory like it was the Olympics. Seeing him walk across that stage, diploma in hand, had filled me with pride and relief. And Sophie. Oh, sweet Sophie. She was my helper, always tagging along as I juggled life. When she broke her arm falling out of a tree, I held her hand in the ER, promising everything would be okay. These memories weren't just fragments of the past. They were proof of everything I'd sacrificed for my kids. Proof that I'd always done what was best for them, even when it hurt. When Mr. Adler finally asked me, "Mrs. Hartley, can you explain why you chose to transfer ownership of your home to Miss Bennett?" I didn't hesitate. "Because," I said, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat, "this house represents decades of love, hard work, and sacrifice. I wanted it to go to someone who values it, not someone who sees it as a financial asset or a burden. Clara understands what this place means to me. My children don't." After my testimony, the energy in the courtroom shifted. It wasn't dramatic, no gasps or standing ovations, but there was a subtle change in how people looked at me. Even the judge seemed more attentive, leaning forward slightly as if to say, "Go on." Mr. Grayson tried to poke holes in my story, of course. He asked pointed questions about my decision-making process, implying I might not have fully understood the implications of transferring ownership. "Mrs. Hartley," he said, his tone dripping with condescension, "wouldn't it have been wiser to consult your children before making such a significant decision?" I took a deep breath, refusing to let him rattle me. Wiser? Maybe. But necessary? No. This was my choice to make, and I made it with full awareness of what it meant for me, for Clara, and for the future of this house. He pressed further, attempting to portray me as impulsive or misguided. But every question he threw at me only reinforced my resolve. With each answer, I felt stronger, more grounded. Then came Sophie's testimony. When Mr. Adler called her to the stand, I braced myself for another emotional roller coaster. She walked to the front of the room slowly, her hands trembling as she swore to tell the truth. "Sophie," Mr. Adler began gently, "can you describe your mother's demeanor during the time leading up to this decision?" She hesitated, glancing briefly at Emily and Daniel before answering. "Mom has always been independent and strong-willed. Even when life got hard, she never gave up. When she told us about the transfer, I could see how much thought she'd put into it. It wasn't a snap decision, it was something she truly believed in." Her words struck a chord, not just with me but with everyone in the room. For the first time, I saw cracks in Emily's polished exterior. Her jaw tightened, and she avoided eye contact with Sophie or me. Daniel, on the other hand, slouched lower in his seat, staring at the floor like he wished he could disappear. When Mr. Grayson cross-examined Sophie, his usual sharpness faltered. He asked her whether she thought I was acting out of frustration or anger toward my other children. "No," she replied firmly. "Mom did this because she wanted to reclaim control of her life. Not out of spite, but out of love for herself and for someone who deserved it." Her voice broke on the last word, and I had to fight back tears. In that moment, I realized Sophie wasn't just supporting me, she was defending me, and herself, from years of unspoken resentment. The turning point came when Mr. Adler played audio clips of conversations I'd recorded with Clara. Yes, I'd secretly taped some of our discussions about the transfer agreement, not because I didn't trust her, but because I knew my kids might challenge my decision. Hearing those recordings, filled with warmth and mutual respect, left no doubt about my intentions, or Clara's integrity. By the end of the day, I felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The battle wasn't over yet, but for the first time, I allowed myself to hope. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as we waited for the judge to deliver her verdict. My palms were sweaty, and my heart raced like it was trying to escape my chest. Beside me, Clara sat rigidly, clutching her hands together so tightly her knuckles turned white. Sophie reached over and squeezed my shoulder, offering silent support. Emily, meanwhile, looked like she was ready to argue until the cows came home. She whispered furiously to Mr. Grayson, who nodded curtly but kept his gaze fixed on the judge. Daniel just stared blankly ahead, looking utterly defeated. Finally, the judge cleared her throat and began speaking. After reviewing all evidence presented in this case, she said, her voice calm but authoritative, it is clear that Mrs. Martha Hartley acted within her rights as the sole owner of the property in question. There is no substantial proof to suggest she lacked mental capacity or was unduly influenced by Miss Clara Bennett. Furthermore, the transfer agreement adheres to legal standards and reflects Mrs. Hartley's stated wishes. A wave of relief washed over me, but I forced myself to stay composed as the judge continued. While I understand the concerns raised by Mrs. Hartley's children, their disagreement does not outweigh her autonomy. It is not the court's role to dictate personal decisions regarding property ownership unless there is compelling evidence of misconduct, which, in this case, there is not. She paused, then delivered the final blow. Therefore, the court rules in favor of Mrs. Hartley. The transfer of ownership to Miss Clara Bennett stands. The room erupted into murmurs. Emily shot out of her seat, her face flushed with anger, while Daniel buried his head in his hands. Sophie, however, smiled faintly at me, mouthing, "Good job, Mom." Clara grabbed my hand, squeezing it tightly. "We did it," she whispered, her eyes shining with tears. As we filed out of the courtroom, I couldn't help but feel a mix of triumph and sadness. Triumph because I'd won, a victory for independence and self-determination. Sadness because my relationship with two of my children might never recover. Still, I reminded myself of why I'd fought so hard. This wasn't just about a house, it was about dignity, legacy, and choosing my own path. And damn it, I was proud of myself. The days following the trial were quiet. Too quiet. Emily stopped calling altogether, and Daniel sent a terse text saying he needed space. Sophie, on the other hand, visited more often, bringing groceries or offering to help with chores. She didn't say much about her siblings, but I could tell she was caught between loyalty to them and her growing bond with me. One afternoon, while we were sitting on the porch sipping lemonade, Sophie finally opened up. "Mom," she said hesitantly, "I think Emily and Daniel are struggling to process everything. They feel betrayed." I sighed, setting my glass down. "Sophie, I never wanted to hurt them, but they treated me like I was incapable of making my own decisions. How would you feel if someone dismissed your independence like that?" She nodded slowly. "I get it, Mom. Really, I do. But they're stubborn and scared. They've always relied on you to be their safety net. Now that you've made this choice, they don't know how to handle it." Her words gave me pause. I'd spent so long focused on defending myself that I hadn't considered how my decision might affect them. Not that it excused their behavior, but it helped me see things from a different perspective. A few weeks later, Daniel surprised me by showing up unannounced. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, stubble on his face, but there was something softer in his expression. "Hey, Mom," he said awkwardly, hovering near the doorway. "Daniel," I replied, motioning for him to come inside. "What brings you here?" He hesitated before sitting across from me at the kitchen table. I wanted to apologize for everything. I shouldn't have doubted you or tried to take control like that." His words caught me off guard. Of all my kids, Daniel had always been the quiet one, the peacemaker who avoided conflict at all costs. Seeing him admit fault meant more than he probably realized. "Thank you," I said softly. "That means a lot." We talked for hours, hashing out old grievances and airing frustrations we both buried for years. He admitted feeling overshadowed by Emily's success and guilty for not being more present after his dad died. I confessed how lonely I'd felt raising 3 kids on my own and how hard it had been to let go as they grew up. By the end of the visit, we hugged, a rare occurrence between us, and promised to keep communicating. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. With the legal battle behind us, Clara officially took ownership of the house. True to her word, she poured her heart into maintaining it. Together, we repainted the exterior a soft sage green, added window boxes bursting with colorful flowers, and planted rose bushes along the fence line. The place hadn't looked this vibrant in decades. Clara turned the attic studio into her art space, filling it with canvases, easels, and jars of paintbrushes. On sunny mornings, she'd sit outside sketching portraits of neighbors or painting murals inspired by the garden. Watching her bring life to the house reminded me why I'd chosen her in the first place. Meanwhile, Sophie became a regular fixture in our little household. She brought her boys over for weekend visits, filling the air with laughter and chaos. Even Mr. Thompson joined in occasionally, teaching the grandkids how to fix bikes or build birdhouses. For the first time in years, the house felt alive again, not just with memories, but with new stories waiting to unfold. Emily, unfortunately, remained distant. She sent a formal letter thanking me for leaving her an inheritance, a small sum from my savings, but made no effort to reconnect. Part of me missed her sharp wit and ambition, but another part accepted that some bridges can't or shouldn't be rebuilt. As for Daniel, our tentative reconciliation gave me hope. He called every few weeks to check in, and during one particularly candid conversation, he admitted he admired my courage. "You stood up to us, Mom," he said, "even when it was hard. That takes guts." His words warmed my heart. Maybe, just maybe, he and Sophie could help heal the rift with Emily someday. Or maybe not. Either way, I'd done what I needed to do, for myself and for the future of this house. One evening, as Clara and I sat on the porch watching the sunset, she turned to me with a smile. "Martha," she said, "thank you for believing in me, for trusting me with this incredible gift." I patted her hand. "Clara, thank you. You've given this old house and this old woman a second chance." And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly at peace. Months passed, and life settled into a new kind of normal. The court case faded into the background, though its ripple effects lingered. Clara and I fell into a comfortable rhythm, sharing meals, tending the garden, and occasionally collaborating on small projects around the house. She'd sketch designs for new flower beds, while I offered advice based on decades of trial and error gardening. The neighbors who once whispered behind their hands now greeted me warmly at the mailbox or waved hello from across the street. Some even complimented Clara's artistic touch, noting how much brighter and more inviting the house looked under her care. It wasn't universal approval. Not everyone understood my decision, but enough people supported us that I felt accepted again. Sophie remained my anchor, visiting regularly with her boys in tow. They called me Grandma Martha and treated me like the matriarch I was, even if my own children sometimes struggled to see me that way. Her presence reminded me that family isn't just blood, it's connection, trust, and love. Still, there were moments of loneliness. Nights when I'd sit by the fireplace, staring at old photos of George and our kids, wondering where things had gone wrong. Was it inevitable? Had I been too hard on them, or maybe not hard enough? These questions haunted me, but they also pushed me to reflect on what really mattered. One crisp autumn afternoon, as I raked leaves in the yard, Mr. Thompson stopped by with his usual cup of coffee and a bag of fresh-baked cookies. "Martha," he said, settling onto the porch swing beside me, "you've done something remarkable here. Not many folks your age would have the guts to shake things up like you did." I chuckled, brushing dirt off my gloves. "Guts or stubbornness? Sometimes I'm not sure which." He grinned. "Call it what you want, but you've inspired a lot of people, including Clara. That girl lights up whenever she talks about you." His words warmed me, but they also made me think. Inspiration wasn't something I'd set out to be. I'd simply wanted to live my life on my terms. Yet here I was, making an impact. On Clara, on Sophie, on the neighborhood. Maybe that was enough. As winter approached, I found myself spending more time indoors, flipping through old photo albums and sorting through boxes of memorabilia. There were pictures of Emily in her cap and gown, Daniel clutching his first Little League trophy, Sophie blowing out birthday candles, surrounded by friends. Each image carried weight, reminders of moments I'd cherished, sacrifices I'd made, and dreams I'd nurtured. But there were gaps too. Missing pieces where laughter should have been, shared holidays skipped because someone was too busy. I realized then that legacy isn't just about what we give, it's about how we connect. About showing up, being present, and choosing love over resentment. With that in mind, I decided to write letters to my children. Not emails or texts, but handwritten notes poured straight from my heart. For Emily, I wrote about pride, how much I admired her drive and determination, even if we didn't always see eye to eye. For Daniel, I expressed gratitude for his quiet strength and apologized for not recognizing it sooner. And for Sophie, I filled pages with thanks for standing by me, for teaching me patience, for reminding me that family could still be a source of joy. I tucked each letter into envelopes and mailed them without expecting replies. To my surprise, Sophie called later that week. "Mom," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "your letter, it meant so much. Thank you." We talked for nearly an hour, her voice breaking as she admitted she'd been afraid of losing me during the trial. Hearing her vulnerability opened another door in our relationship, one built on honesty and mutual understanding. Emily never responded, but Daniel sent a brief note saying he appreciated mine. It wasn't much, but it was progress. A step toward healing wounds that might never fully close. It was a chilly February morning when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Clara had already left for an art gallery opening downtown, and Sophie rarely visited midweek. So when I opened the door to find Daniel standing there, looking nervous and out of place in his rumpled coat, my heart skipped a beat. "Hey, Mom," he said softly, shifting from one foot to the other. "Can we talk?" I nodded, stepping aside to let him in. He followed me into the living room, where I offered him a seat by the fireplace. The air between us felt heavy, charged with unspoken words. "What brings you here, Daniel?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light despite the lump forming in my throat. He hesitated, staring at his hands as if searching for the right words. Finally, he spoke. "I've been thinking a lot lately about everything. About the trial, about us. And I realized I owe you more than just an apology." My breath hitched. This wasn't the same man who'd stormed out of family dinners or avoided difficult conversations. Something had shifted in him, and I braced myself for whatever came next. "You were right, Mom," he continued, his voice trembling slightly. "We treated you like you weren't capable of making your own decisions. Like you needed us to swoop in and fix things. But all you ever wanted was to be seen for who you are, not what we thought you should be." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I didn't interrupt. "I'm sorry," he said, finally meeting my gaze. "For doubting you. For letting fear and frustration cloud my judgment. For not being the son you deserved." His honesty hit me like a freight train. All the anger, hurt, and disappointment I'd carried for months melted away, replaced by a flood of compassion. "Daniel," I whispered, reaching for his hand, "you're human. We all make mistakes, including me. What matters is that we learn from them and try to do better." He nodded, blinking back tears of his own. "I want to do better, Mom. Starting now." We spent the rest of the afternoon talking, really talking, for the first time in years. He shared how overwhelmed he'd felt juggling work and parenting, how he'd resented Emily's success without realizing it, and how he'd always looked up to me even when he couldn't say it aloud. In return, I told him about my fears of aging alone, my struggles with feeling irrelevant, and my hopes for reconciliation. By the time he left, hugging me tightly before stepping back into the cold, I felt lighter, as if a piece of my heart that had been missing had finally clicked back into place. In the weeks following Daniel's visit, something remarkable happened. Word spread through the neighborhood, not just about my legal battle or Clara's newfound ownership, but about the larger message behind it all: independence, resilience, and choosing your own path. Inspired by our story, Clara decided to organize a community art project called Generations United. The idea was simple yet powerful: pair local seniors with younger residents to create collaborative murals celebrating intergenerational connections. She invited me to help oversee the project, and I jumped at the chance to contribute. On a sunny Saturday morning, dozens of neighbors gathered in the park near my house. Kids brought chalk and paints, while older folks shared stories and memories to inspire the artwork. One mural depicted a tree with roots stretching deep into the ground, symbolizing the importance of history and heritage. Another showed hands of different ages clasped together, representing unity across generations. As I watched everyone work side by side, laughter ringing out and ideas flowing freely, I felt a profound sense of belonging. These people, my neighbors, my friends, had become my chosen family. They reminded me that life isn't just about bloodlines, it's about the bonds we forge along the way. Even Mr. Thompson got involved, sketching outlines for a mural inspired by his wild youth. "Never too old to leave a mark," he quipped, winking at me. The project culminated in a community celebration, complete with live music, food trucks, and speeches from participants. Clara stood up to thank everyone, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "This project wouldn't have been possible without Martha Hartley," she said, gesturing toward me. "She taught me, and all of us, that home isn't just a place, it's the people who fill it with love." Applause erupted, and I felt tears prick my eyes. For so long, I'd feared becoming invisible, fading into the background as life moved on without me. But here I was, surrounded by people who valued me, not out of obligation, but because they genuinely cared. As spring approached, I found myself reflecting on how far I'd come since that fateful family dinner months earlier. The trial, the letters, Daniel's unexpected visit, it all felt like pieces of a puzzle slowly clicking into place. Life hadn't turned out perfectly. I still missed George, worried about Emily, and wondered if Clara would truly be okay carrying the weight of this house, but I was learning to accept imperfection. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, I sat on the porch with Clara. She was sketching something in her notebook, her brow furrowed in concentration, while I sipped chamomile tea. "You know," I said after a long silence, "I used to think happiness meant having everything figured out. A perfect family, a perfect home, a perfect life." Clara glanced up, her pencil pausing mid-stroke. "And now," I smiled, leaning back in my chair, "now I think happiness is just being okay with the messiness. Loving people even when they disappoint you. Finding beauty in the cracks." She nodded thoughtfully, then returned to her sketch. When she finished, she held it up for me to see. A delicate drawing of our house, surrounded by blooming flowers and framed by towering trees. In the corner, she'd added a small figure sitting on the porch, a woman with silver hair, gazing at the sunset. "That's beautiful," I murmured, touched by the detail. "It's you," she said simply. "This house isn't just mine anymore, it's ours. And someday, it'll belong to someone else entirely. But no matter who lives here, your spirit will always be part of it." Her words stayed with me long after she went inside. They reminded me that legacy isn't about control, it's about impact. About leaving something behind that makes others feel seen, valued, and loved. Later that night, as I lay in bed listening to the familiar creaks and groans of the old house, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of aging, not of losing things, not even of dying. Because I'd done what I set out to do. I'd lived boldly, unapologetically, and on my own terms. Years passed, and life continued its relentless march forward. Clara thrived in the house, transforming it into a vibrant hub of creativity and community. She hosted art shows, poetry readings, and neighborhood gatherings, keeping the spirit of connection alive. Photos of me, smiling beside flower beds or laughing with Clara, adorn the walls, serving as reminders of where it all began. Sophie visited often, bringing her grandkids along to explore the garden and listen to stories about their great-grandmother. Her boys grew into kind, curious young men who treated me like a treasure, peppering me with questions about the old days. Daniel, too, stayed in touch, calling regularly and visiting whenever he could. Though Emily never fully reconciled with me, she sent a letter shortly before my death, expressing regret and love. Sophie read it aloud to me during one of her visits, her voice trembling as she shared her sister's heartfelt words. When I passed away peacefully at the age of 92, surrounded by loved ones, including Clara and Daniel, the community came together to honor my memory. Clara organized a tribute at the park where Generations United had begun, inviting neighbors to share stories and celebrate my life. "Martha taught us that home isn't just a building," Clara said during her speech, tears streaming down her face. It's the people who fill it with laughter, kindness, and courage. And she taught me that family isn't defined by blood, it's defined by love. The crowd erupted in applause, and I swear I could feel George smiling somewhere nearby. On the day of my funeral, Sophie stood beside Clara, holding hands as they greeted mourners. Emily didn't attend, but she sent flowers with a note. Thank you for teaching me strength. I wish I'd understood sooner. Daniel spoke briefly, his voice thick with emotion. Mom wasn't perfect, he admitted, but she was real. She showed us how to fight for what matters, and how to forgive when it counts most. Afterward, Clara led everyone back to the house for a celebration of life. The dining table groaned under the weight of homemade dishes, lasagna, fried chicken, apple pie, all staples from my recipe box. Laughter filled the air as old friends swapped memories, and children darted through the rooms, their giggles echoing off the walls. In the living room, someone played an old recording of me reading bedtime stories to Sophie when she was little. My voice crackled slightly, but the warmth was unmistakable. Look at this place, Mr. Thompson said, shaking his head in wonder. Still standing strong, just like you, Martha. He was right. The house wasn't just a structure. It was a testament to resilience, love, and second chances. And though I was gone, my presence lingered in the memories, the traditions, and the people who carried a piece of me with them. As the sun set over Maplewood, casting golden light across the yard, Clara stepped outside to water the roses I'd planted years ago. She paused, looking up at the sky. Thanks for trusting me with this, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I won't let you down. And I knew she wouldn't. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Life doesn't come with guarantees. People will hurt you, plans will fall apart, and sometimes you'll feel utterly alone. But none of that means you're powerless. You have the ability to choose, to stand firm in your truth, to surround yourself with people who value you, and to create a legacy that transcends time. To my kids, wherever they are, I love you fiercely, flaws and all. To Clara, thank you for proving that family isn't just about DNA. It's about showing up, staying true, and loving without conditions. And to you, my dear listener, never underestimate your capacity for courage. Whether you're facing a courtroom battle, mending fractured relationships, or simply trying to find joy in the everyday, remember, you're stronger than you think. So go out there and live boldly. Fill your days with love, laughter, and purpose. And when the road gets tough, lean on the people who remind you of who you are. This is Martha Hartley signing off, for good this time. Until we meet again, take care of yourselves. And don't forget to water the roses,